Picture ancient Makkah for a second. It's a harsh, really unforgiving desert landscape. But amid all that, imagine a single ray of light breaking through the heavy clouds over the city, revealing a figure of just unparalleled piety and resilience. Today we're diving straight into the life of Fatima bint Muhammad, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad and Lady Khadijah. Her life was incredibly brief, but as we're going to see in this explainer, it essentially became a masterpiece of devotion, a bridge connecting the era of prophethood to all the generations that followed. So to really understand her, we have to look at this profound declaration from the Prophet himself. He literally said, "Fatima is a part of me. Whoever pleases her pleases me." And this wasn't just a standard statement of a father's love. It really sets the stage for her massive spiritual and historical impact. The sources tell us the relationship was beautifully unique. In a society where father-daughter relationships could be quite distant, they would actually stand up to welcome each other, kissing each other on the forehead. She was an absolute central pillar in the very foundation of the early Muslim community. And her defining titles, they kind of perfectly capture who she was. She's universally known as Al-Zahra, which means the radiant. This points to the pure, radiant nature of her character and her incredibly deep devotion and prayer. But then, contrast that beautifully ethereal title with her other name, Abiha, meaning mother of her father. Now, she didn't get that because she was delicate. No, she earned it because of the heavy, grounding trials she faced to fiercely protect and nurture her father during the absolute hardest years of his mission. Section 1. The Child of Makkah. Hardship and Devotion. To really grasp those titles, we have to look at her early years. Her childhood was absolutely not one of luxury. She grew up surrounded by fierce, often violent resistance against the early Muslims by the Quraysh tribe. And that brings us to this incredibly visceral incident. The texts recount a day when the Prophet was praying near the Kaaba, and the leaders of the Quraysh decided to humiliate him. They took the heavy, bloody entrails of a slaughtered camel and just dumped them onto his back while he was in prostration. And they laughed. But it was young Fatima who boldly ran right into that hostile crowd. Using her bare hands, she threw the filth off her father's shoulders and fiercely scolded the attackers. I mean, it's exactly that kind of fierce courage that earned her the title Mother of her Father. Section 2. A Union of Light. Marriage to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Fast forward a bit to Medina, where Fatima marries Ali ibn Abi Talib. It was a divine union often described as light with light. But look, don't let the poetic descriptions mislead you about their actual day-to-day reality. Their home was defined by extreme poverty and real asceticism. Fatima's daily life was physically grueling. We are talking about hands totally calloused and blistered from constantly turning this heavy stone mill just to grind green. We're talking about clothes patched together with her own stitches and nights where she would literally give away her own bread and go to sleep hungry. It was a life of severe, intentional simplicity. So how did they handle all that hardship? Well, when the physical labor just became too much, Fatima went to her father to ask for a servant to help out. But instead of material wealth or physical help, the Prophet gave her a spiritual tool. He taught her the tasbih of Fatima. It's the recitation of Subhanallah 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times, and Allahu Akbar 34 times right before going to sleep. He told her this would be far better for her than a servant. And honestly, it's pretty amazing that this exact practice is still observed by millions of Muslims around the world today to find spiritual strength when they're physically exhausted. Section 3. The First to Follow. The Whisper of the Prophet. Okay, lean in for this one, because we're at the emotional climax of the narrative. It's the year 11 AH, and the Prophet Muhammad has fallen into its final illness. The atmosphere in the room is just incredibly heavy, and Fatima is right there by his side. The historical sources all document this deeply personal, secretive exchange. The Prophet leans in and whispers something into Fatima's ear, and immediately, she just begins to weep bitterly. But then, he pulls her close again and whispers a second secret, and right there, through her tears, she breaks into a radiant smile. I want you to think about the weight of that. What could possibly cause such a massive, rapid shift from profound grief to joy? Well, here is the emotional payoff, which Fatima actually revealed herself after he passed. That first whisper? It was the Prophet confirming that he wasn't going to recover from his illness. Obviously, that was the source of her immense grief. But the second whisper, the one that brought her that serene smile, was a promise. He told her, "You will be the first of my family to follow me, and you will be the chief of the women of paradise." So her joy came from knowing with absolute certainty that their separation was going to be incredibly brief. Section 4. Final Trials and Legacy. The Dispute over Fadak. Now that brief period of separation from her father was anything but peaceful. Let's map out this timeline quickly because things happen fast. It's a dense, chaotic few months in 11 AH. Right after the Prophet's death, literally while his family is preparing his body, a political gathering at Saqifa results in Abu Bakr being named the first caliph. Almost immediately after that, a major legal and financial dispute blows up over a property called Fadak. And then, very shortly after all of this, Fatima herself passes away. Let's look objectively at that Fadak dispute, which is famously detailed in the Sermon of Fadak. Fadak was this really wealthy agricultural land. Fatima claimed it as her rightful inheritance, and she cited Quranic verses showing that past prophets like Solomon and David left inheritances for their families. On the flip side, Abu Bakr, acting as the new caliph, ruled against her claim. He cited a saying he'd heard from the prophet stating that prophets do not leave property as inheritance, anything they leave behind is public charity. So we're looking at a deeply complex, highly principled legal standoff where both sides firmly believed they were upholding the prophet's true legacy. And this turbulence spills right over into the historical accounts of the end of her life. It's a perfect example of how early Islamic history is viewed through very different lenses. Sunni historical accounts generally state that Fatima, just totally heartbroken over the loss of her father, passed away from natural causes and immense grief within about 6 months. Conversely, Shia historical accounts document that following the political disputes, a raid was actually ordered on her house to force her husband Ali's political allegiance. According to these sources, this resulted in fatal physical injuries and the tragic miscarriage of her unborn son, Masin. For us exploring this material, it's absolutely vital to understand that both of these historical perspectives exist, and they profoundly shape the theology of millions today. Section 5, The Secret Burial, a Final Will of Modesty and Protest. Regardless of the exact circumstances of her passing, her final days were meticulously planned by her. Before she died, she wrote a detailed will with highly specific instructions for her funeral. It was basically an ultimate act of modesty, but also a silent, incredibly powerful protest. She requested that her burial happen in total secrecy, right in the dead of night. She even instructed that a special bier be built using palm branches to completely hide the silhouette of her body, guaranteeing her absolute modesty even in death. Think about the sensory reality of that moment. A quiet, pitch-black funeral procession moving through the sleeping streets of Medina with only her closest family. Because of that specific request, her exact resting place remains a mystery to the entire world, even today. Section 6. The Eternal Legacy. The Radiant Blueprint. But here's the thing. A hidden grave did not mean a hidden legacy. She passed away at a very young age, but the Prophet's lineage survived entirely through her children, Hasan, Husayn, Zainab, and Kulthum. These descendants would go on to be arguably the most pivotal figures in Islamic history. So what's the big takeaway for us here? Why does her story matter to you? Because Fatima became the ultimate archetype of Muslim womanhood. She's the gold standard of perfect faith. She represents absolute compassion for the poor, she's an unwavering defender of justice in the face of authority, and she's a symbol of devotion who deliberately chose spiritual wealth over material comfort. She is literally the blueprint for ethical living. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought. Fatima went to extraordinary lengths to preserve her modesty, to live simply, and even to be buried secretly in the dark. Yet, paradoxically, how did a life lived so incredibly unseen become one of the most visible, deeply revered, and enduring archetypes in human history? I think it's a profound testament to the idea that true radiance doesn't actually come from the spotlight. It comes from the absolute purity of your character. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.